3 days after my car accident, while I was still in the ICU with internal bleeding, my father tried to steal my house. Not metaphorically. Literally. He filed paperwork to drain the equity from my condo while I was unconscious in a hospital bed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up to the night that changed everything. My name is Iris, and I'm 26. It was 3:15 in the morning when the ambulance brought me into Massachusetts General Hospital. I'd been in a bad crash, really bad. The kind where you're not sure if you're going to make it. I was lying on this gurney, and honest to God, every breath felt like my chest was being ripped open from the inside. The doctor came over, and I could see it in his face before he even spoke. That look that says, "This is serious. Iris, you have internal bleeding. We need to get you into surgery right now." I nodded. What else could I do? But there's a complication, he continued. Your medical history shows you had a severe reaction to standard anesthesia a few years ago. We need to use a different protocol, and hospital policy requires family consent for that. Family consent. Okay. I could do that. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone, but I managed to dial my parents. Gregory and Carolyn. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Voicemail. I left a message. My voice was breaking, I was trying not to cry, trying to sound calm even though I was terrified. Mom, Dad, I've been in an accident. I'm at Mass General. They need you to sign consent forms for surgery. Please call me back. An hour went by. Do you know what an hour feels like when you're bleeding internally? When every minute that passes, you can feel yourself getting weaker. When the nurses keep checking on you with those concerned looks that they try to hide but can't quite manage. It feels like forever. Finally, my phone lit up. I grabbed it so fast I almost dropped it. A text message. From my father. Can't this wait? We're busy. Meeting with clients. I stared at that message. Read it again. And again. Can't this wait? I was lying in a hospital bed, bleeding internally, needing emergency surgery, and my father wanted to know if it could wait because he was busy with clients. That's the moment I broke. Not from the physical pain, that was bad, but this was something else entirely. This was the moment I realized that to my own parents, I was less important than a business meeting. I started sobbing. These harsh, racking sobs that made my broken ribs scream in agony. But I couldn't stop. The physical pain was nothing compared to this crushing realization that I was completely alone. A male nurse named Marco noticed immediately. He came over, and right behind him was this social worker, Isabel. She had kind eyes, the kind that have seen too much but still care. Iris, she said gently, kneeling beside my gurney. Is there anyone else? Another relative we can call? Through my tears, I managed to give her one more number. My grandpa, Henry. My mother's father. Isabel stepped out to make the call. When she came back a few minutes later, she was smiling. He's on his way. He said he'll be there in under an hour. My grandpa lived 50 miles away, outside the city. But sure enough, less than an hour later, I heard his voice at the nurse's station. I'm here for my granddaughter, Iris. He rushed through those double doors, and I swear to God, I'd never been so relieved to see anyone in my entire life. He was 74, a retired carpenter, and he still had sawdust on his old flannel shirt. He must have dropped everything and just driven straight here. He came right to my bedside, and his weathered hands wrapped around mine. Oh, Iris, he whispered. That was it. Just my name. But the way he said it, it held more love than I'd felt in my entire life from my own parents. The doctor explained everything to him. Grandpa Henry listened carefully, asked smart questions about the risks and the alternative anesthesia protocol. Then he took the clipboard and signed the consent forms with a steady hand. As they started wheeling me toward the operating room, he leaned down and kissed my forehead. I'll be right here when you wake up, kiddo. Don't you worry. And you know what? When I woke up hours later, groggy and confused and hurting everywhere, the first thing I saw was him. Sitting in that uncomfortable hospital chair next to my bed. His silver hair was messy, and he was halfway through a crossword puzzle, but he was there. He'd stayed the entire time. Seeing him there, my protector, it unleashed this flood of memories. My whole life, compressed into one painful realization. My parents, Gregory and Carolyn, were prominent financial advisors in Newton. They lived in this sleek, modern condo that looked like something out of a magazine. Everything was expensive, everything was perfect, and everything had a price tag they could quote. I remembered when I told them I was taking a job as a nonprofit coordinator. My mother's smile had gone tight. That's nice, Iris. But it doesn't really pay, does it? My father was even worse. When I proudly showed them my first car, a used Toyota Corolla with 85,000 miles on it, he just sighed. When are you going to get serious, Iris? This is why you should have gone into finance. Nothing I did was ever good enough because it didn't make enough money. But Grandpa Henry was different. Always had been. When my parents skipped my college graduation for a conference in the Bahamas, Grandpa Henry was there. Sitting in the pouring rain, holding a bouquet of daisies, cheering louder than anyone when they called my name. He was the one who taught me how to work with my hands. How to throw clay on a pottery wheel, how to paint ceramics. Anything made with love, he'd always say, is worth more than something bought with money. He was the one who showed up. He was always the only one who showed up. And now, in the most terrifying moment of my life, he was the only one there again. For days after my surgery, my parents finally made an appearance. They walked into my hospital room like they were doing me this huge favor. My father was already checking his phone before he even looked at me. My mother handed me a small bag of drugstore candy, the kind you grab at a gas station checkout. "Well, you look better," my mother said, not quite meeting my eyes. "The parking here is just awful." "Iris," my father complained, pacing near the window, "we had to circle for 20 minutes. They stayed for exactly 35 minutes. I know because I watched the clock. In that time, my mother complained about a difficult client. My father asked me, "So what's the timeline? When do they think you can get back to work?" Not, "Are you in pain?" Not, "What did the doctor say?" But when could I be productive again? They left to make a dinner reservation. When that door clicked shut, the silence they left behind hurt more than any of my injuries. A few days later, the medical team came to talk about discharge. "Your apartment is on the second floor, correct?" the doctor asked. I nodded. "With your leg and shoulder injuries, you won't be able to manage stairs for at least 6 weeks. Panic hit me. My parents' condo was famously not set up for guests. They'd said so many times. It was their space, perfectly designed for 2. Before I could even process this problem, Grandpa Henry's voice came from the corner. "She's coming home with me." He'd been there every single day, and I hadn't even realized he was listening. He told the doctor he was retired, his house was 1 level, and he'd already built a temporary ramp for the front steps. Just like that, it was settled. Moving into his small, worn house was like breathing clean air for the first time. He set me up in the guest room, cooked all my meals, and sat with me through the brutal physical therapy sessions. But late at night, I'd lie awake wrestling with this shameful question. Why did I still check my phone, hoping for a text from them? Why did that insulting 35-minute visit still feel like something I'd wanted? I'd read about this in a psychology class once. It's called learned helplessness. It's what happens when you're in a painful situation for so long that your brain stops trying to escape. You learn to accept the pain as normal. For 26 years, I'd been trained to accept their emotional neglect. A child who only gets validation once in a blue moon learns to crave it. Those tiny, worthless crumbs start to look like a feast. My parents had conditioned me to be grateful for any scrap of attention, no matter how cold or brief. I wasn't weak. I was trained. And lying in that quiet house, surrounded by my grandpa's unconditional love, I finally realized the training was over. As I started healing physically, the administrative nightmare began. My neighbor Sophie, this sweet teacher who lived below me, had been collecting my mail. She brought over this huge box of letters. "I didn't want to bother you while you were, you know." She trailed off, her eyes full of sympathy. But it just kept piling up. I sat at Grandpa Henry's kitchen table and started sorting through it. Medical bills that made my stomach drop. Insurance statements. The usual post-accident chaos. Then I found something that didn't make sense. A confusing letter from my disability insurance provider. The policy I had through work. I called them. After 20 minutes on hold, a polite representative picked up. "Hi, I'm trying to sort out my claim." I was in an accident about 3 weeks ago. Yes, ma'am, she interrupted. We've already been in communication with your financial proxies regarding this account. Ice water dumped through my veins. My what? Who? Your parents. Gregory and Carolyn. They contacted us 3 days after your accident, inquiring about the protocol for liquidating the entire fund. Liquidating. Not accessing for my care. Liquidating. My mind flashed back 2 years. I was sitting in my father's sleek, glass-walled office. He'd insisted on helping me set up my first real investment portfolio and supplemental disability insurance. It's just standard procedure, Iris, he'd said, sliding a pen across the desk. We'll add me and your mother as financial proxies. Makes it easier to manage. I'd been so grateful. I thought he was finally taking an interest in my life. Now I realized he'd been setting a trap. My hands were shaking, but not from weakness. This was cold, clinical anger. I hung up and immediately called my father. He answered on the second ring, voice all casual. Iris, we were just wondering when you'd call. Why did you try to liquidate my disability fund? Heavy silence. Now, Iris, he finally said, using that condescending tone he reserved for difficult clients. The market is down. We were just looking to restructure your assets. Move that money before it lost value. Move it where, Dad? It's just a simple restructure. Move it where, Dad? He snapped. The polished veneer cracked. The firm is having some cash flow issues, if you must know. It's a temporary loan. You'll get it back. Don't be so dramatic. A temporary loan. He was planning to use the money I needed to survive while I couldn't work to save his failing business. This wasn't neglect anymore. This was theft. I hung up on him. But that cold realization was just beginning. I went back to Sophie's pile of mail with new eyes. Sorting through everything carefully now, looking for what else they might have done. Then I found it. An official-looking envelope from a bank I didn't even have an account with. I tore it open. It was a loan rejection letter. But not for a credit card. It was declining an application for a home equity line of credit. On my condo. My father had co-signed when I bought it 2 years ago. I didn't have enough credit history on my own, and he'd insisted it was just a formality to help me get started. He'd used that formality to try and drain the equity from my home. The application date was 2 days after my accident. While I was in the ICU, unconscious, he wasn't just trying to liquidate my disability fund. He was actively trying to leverage my home to save his business. All that sadness I'd felt, the learned helplessness, it evaporated. It was replaced by something sharp and cold and clear. This wasn't a family dispute. This wasn't neglect. This was predation. They were circling my assets like vultures, waiting for me to be weak enough to pick apart. I didn't cry this time. I just looked up at Grandpa Henry, who was watching me from the doorway, his face full of worry. I didn't have to say anything. I handed him the letter. He read it, and his face went thunderous. He stared at it for a long minute. Then he put the letter down, walked to his study, and came back holding this old, cracked leather address book. He flipped through the pages, found what he was looking for, and picked up the landline phone. Sullivan, he said. It's Henry. Yeah, it's been a long time. I'm good, but I'm calling about my granddaughter. She's in trouble. He listened, then held the phone out to me. Mr. Sullivan will talk to you. Mr. Sullivan was a lawyer Grandpa had known for 40 years. I explained everything, my voice steady and cold. The hospital. The text. The 35-minute visit. The disability fund. The home equity application. Long silence on the other end. Iris, he finally said, his voice calm and serious, what your parents have done isn't just unethical. It's potentially fraudulent. They used their position of trust to gain access, and they attempted to act on it without your consent while you were incapacitated. We can fix this. And we can fix it now. What do we do? You rest and heal, he said. I could hear him scribbling notes. I'm going to draft a full revocation of power of attorney, cease and desist notifications, and new documents naming your grandfather for both medical and financial decisions. I'll have them ready tomorrow. When I hung up, the betrayal still stung. But for the first time, I felt powerful. This wasn't family drama anymore. This was a legal fight. And I was ready. For weeks to the day after my accident, I called my parents and asked them to come to Grandpa Henry's house. I was off the painkillers. My mind was clear. I was steady on crutches. They arrived at 2 p.m., clearly annoyed. My father walked in first, not even looking at me. "Iris, this is very inconvenient. We have a 3 o'clock showing. Whatever this is, make it quick." He stopped when he saw the setup. I was sitting in an armchair, injured leg propped up. On one side sat Grandpa Henry, hands folded calmly. On the other side sat Mr. Sullivan in a full suit, holding a briefcase. My mother saw him and her professional smile faltered. "What's going on? Who is this?" "Please sit down," I said. My voice was even. It surprised me how steady it was. They sat on the sofa across from me. I reached for a manila envelope on the coffee table and slid it toward them. My father scoffed. "What's this? More medical bills?" "These," I said, meeting his gaze, "are legal documents. A full revocation of any power of attorney you hold over me. Cease and desist notifications. And papers removing you as proxies and beneficiaries from every one of my accounts and insurance policies. Effective immediately." My mother's hand flew to her mouth. "Iris, no. How could you? After everything we've done for you." My father's face turned deep red. The successful financial advisor mask disappeared completely. "Ungrateful," he yelled, standing up. "This is how you repay us. We were trying to protect your assets." The word protect hung in the air, so vile it made me sick. I looked at him. Not with anger. With cold, quiet finality. "Protect them?" I asked. "Or liquidate them? Like how you applied for a home equity loan on my condo while I was in surgery." Complete silence. My mother stopped crying. Just stared at me, mouth open. My father's face went pale. The rage vanished, replaced by the hollow shock of being caught. He sat back down hard. He had nothing to say. He'd been so sure of his own intelligence, so sure of my weakness, that he never imagined being held accountable. "You don't know the pressure we're under," my mother finally whispered. "The firm." "I know," I cut her off. "But your failing career isn't my problem. Not anymore. Sign the papers. Here's what I want you to understand. We're taught that blood is thicker than water. That family is forever. But that's a weapon toxic people use to keep you trapped. They count on your guilt, your sentimentality. They rely on you setting yourself on fire to keep them warm. Sometimes letting go of blood ties isn't betrayal. It's self-preservation. It's not about finding hate. It's about finally choosing to find yourself. It's the moment you stop being their victim and start being your own rescuer." My father, hands shaking with rage, snatched a pen and scribbled his name on the documents. My mother signed after him, tears staining the paper. They left without another word. My father didn't look back. The door closed, and the silence in my grandpa's living room was absolute. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 26 years. The weeks that followed were about rebuilding. Not just my body, but my entire life. With Mr. Sullivan's help, I secured everything. New accounts at a different bank. New passwords. Fraud alerts on my credit. I sold the condo. I couldn't stand living there, knowing my father had seen it as just another asset to strip. I found a small apartment on the ground floor with wide doorways and a little patio. Grandpa Henry came over and built a sturdy wooden ramp for the entrance. "Just until you're steady on your feet," he said. But I knew he built it to last. I went back to my nonprofit job, but I wasn't the same person. The experience had forged something new in me. I used what I'd learned, the legal loopholes, the insurance nightmares, the vulnerability of being a patient, and I pitched a new program to my boss. A program providing free legal and financial advocacy for survivors of major medical events, protecting them from exactly this kind of predatory exploitation. My boss loved it. We launched it 3 months later. My life is quiet now, but it's full. Last night, I hosted dinner at my apartment. Grandpa Henry was teaching Marco, the nurse from the hospital, how to cheat at cards. Sophie brought a pie. We ate, we laughed, and I looked around at the hand-painted ceramic bowls I'd made, now full of food shared with people I loved. That's when I realized I was finally whole. If you're listening to this and you've always felt like you were on the fringes of your own family, I want you to hear something. You are not defined by the love you didn't receive. Your worth is not determined by their inability to see you. You're not a supporting character in their story. You're the lead in yours. Building a family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who listens, who respects you and protects you, who, when you're broken, sits with you in the dark and then helps you build a ramp. Don't be afraid to let go of what's hurting you. Don't be afraid to choose yourself. Your real family, the one waiting for you, will be there to catch you. Thanks for listening, and if this story resonates with you, don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself when family fails you. Because sometimes the family you choose is the one that saves your life.